Good evening, everyone, and you're all very welcome to tonight's webinar, which has been brought to you tonight by the Advisory Service here in County Mayo. My name is Brendan Garry. I work in Teagasc Ballinrobe, and tonight for the next hour, I'm delighted to be your host for this webinar. Now, this evening's webinar is the second episode in a new 4-part series of webinars, which will run throughout the month of February, each Wednesday night at 8 p.m, and we'll be discussing some of the key agricultural issues facing Irish farmers. Tonight, however, the focus switches to examining and discussing the new direct payment system, which has been introduced by the Department of Agriculture this spring. And my colleague Eamonn Patten from Teagasc Ballinrobe will present on this topic shortly. We will also review the new National Reserve and Complementary Income Support Scheme for young farmers. And this scheme replaces the previous Young Farmer Scheme, which has been in operation since 2015. And this will be of huge interest there to the young trained farmers across the countryside who have recently completed their agricultural education or those in the middle of their studies. And later this evening, my colleague Enda Maloney from Teagasc Ballinrobe will also provide information on this new important schemes. Now, you, the viewers, are being encouraged to engage with our speakers here tonight, and we ask you to put your questions into your Q&A tablet, our phone, or button at the bottom of your screens. And later this evening, our regional manager here in County Mayo, Vivian Silke, will put your questions live to our panelists. So please type your questions into the Q&A box. It's worth mentioning as well, look at that the final terms and conditions of these schemes haven't yet been published. So we may not have all the answers to all the questions tonight, but we will endeavour to answer as many as possible. As always, this webinar is being recorded and it will be available to watch back on the Teagasc Mayo YouTube channel in the coming days. So without further delay, I'm now going to hand it over to you, Eamonn, to start sharing your presentation. And it's over to you now, Eamonn.
Great, thanks very much, Brendan. You're all very welcome this evening.
Just get you to make that maybe full screen, Eamonn. That's perfect. Oh.
Yeah. Is that a decent?
That's perfect, yeah.
Okay. Right, good evening again, everybody. What I'm going to cover here is really the basic payments scheme replacement, or I suppose most people regard this as the check in the post. And I suppose it's a bit apt that I'm talking about this evening because I'd say a lot of people have got a statement from the department in the last year or two stating the amount of money they received in the last year from the department. So it's a vital payment to keep agriculture scene going. So we want to try and make sure that every farmer gets the maximum out of it. It has been said that the scheme is the same but different. I suppose the difference is the new environmental aspect creeping in, or more focus on the environment. There's more focus on the environment, water quality, climate, and biodiversity. So if we start into it here, I'll just get a pointer here. Right, there's new titles for 2023 to 27, I suppose. And this is the first one, BISS, B-I-S-S, Basic Income Support Scheme. And that's the basic replacement for BPS. Another title is CRISS, and that means Complementary Redistributive Income Scheme. A front loading is what I'm going to call it from now on this evening. The Eco Scheme is the new version of greening. And the Young Farmer Scheme, Complementary Income Support for Young Farmers, which my colleague Enda will discuss further later. So if we compare the old and the new, I suppose it's a starting point. The old situation, your basic payment was 70% of your payment, and the greening was another 30%. And in fairness, I suppose most people, most grassland farmers anyway, got that payment automatically. I suppose the good news is an awful lot of people will qualify for this new eco scheme as well, but maybe not as easily. So that's your 100% there, the old. The new setup, it's the budget is 3% to the young farmers, 10% for this new front loading, 25% to the eco scheme, and the remainder is left for BISS. I suppose the unfortunate thing for us all on the farming side of things is that the kitty or the size of the pot there is the same all the time. And that pot hasn't changed really the last 20 years. Well, since 2020, 2005. So a generation ago, I would view it as at this stage. We still have this idea of convergence, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. In the old scheme, convergence came wherever entitlement had to be worth 60% of the national average. The new regime it has to go to 85%. There's a cap on payments. On the old scheme, it was 150,000. That has been cut drastically in this one to 60,000. That's just on the BISS part of it for those of you that might have lucky enough to have big payments. And there's a straw incorporation measure there on protein payment as well, a couple support. And that's in the new one as well. So I suppose the starting point here would be the entitlements themselves. There's no actual reference years. So whatever entitlements you have at the minute is what you're stuck with. So there's no up and or down the number of entitlements, that's what you have. The only way that will probably change maybe if you are to get extra entitlements out of National Reserve or something like that, until we're talking about that. All entitlement values will change in 2023 for everyone. So we must get used to that idea. And all farmers will receive a statement of entitlements supposedly in February. It could go into March, I would think. An important point there would some people might have not enough entitlements or have excess entitlements. Transfers will still be possible in the usual way, but there's a change this year with the clawback situation. If you're selling entitlements without land, there's no clawback for the year 23 or 24. So if you had excess entitlement, and I know a lot of people out there may have 1s and 2s and 3s and 4 and 5 entitlements that they're not using, maybe a time to think about letting them go. The total, the CRISS then is the front loading. I'm starting with this one here now to explain it a bit more because it's the simplest one. It's 10% of the total budget. It's about 118 million, so it's a substantial amount. It's a very simple idea here is that farmers will receive a payment of 43 euros per hectare up to a maximum of 30 hectares. So the maximum benefit will be around 1290, 1300. It's a bit like the ANC payment. I won't dwell on the ANC too much this evening, but this payment is similar in you get paid up to the 30 hectares. We're after hearing recently that there will be a requirement here to have at least one entitlement. So that might put a span on the works for someone that has no entitlements. Just giving an example here at the bottom, okay, if you have 20 hectares, you'll get 20 by the 43, that adds up to 860. If you have 30 hectares, you maximize your money, you get the 1290, but if you have 50 hectares, you still only get the 1290. This is where the fun starts and the complications, and this is where I'd be sort of a bit fearful of the complications for you, the farmer, and us advisors down the road. This eco scheme is not acres, so that's an important point I want to get across. It's nothing to do with, it's unfortunate the way it has been christened. It's not acres. It's 25% of Pillar 1, so it's a lot of money set aside for it. It's replacing the greening, and the payment on it will be on a per hectare basis. So it has nothing really to do with entitlements, and there is no linkage to the entitlements on this. So it'll be payment on whatever eligible hectares you declare on your form. The payment will be maybe 63 euros, and that may go up to maybe over the 70s. I heard the figure of 77 mentioned. Depends on how many people opt to go for this. Payment is based on the eligible hectares on your application form. You have to qualify or take 2 tasks on board to qualify. You must qualify, you must deliver 2 agricultural practices beyond this conditionality. So what is conditionality? Conditionality is the replacement for cross-compliance that was in the old scheme. And the one that affects us here for the eco scheme is good agricultural environmental condition 8. And that sets aside that you have to have at least 4% of your holding has space for nature. If it has more than 4%, say you get to 7%, you have one of these jobs completed or one of these options. And say you're lucky enough to have 10% space for nature on your farm, then you have the 2 jobs completed. So you automatically have qualified for this eco scheme or greening. Farmer can opt in or opt out on an annual basis, and you can change the agricultural practices annually. All right. This is the list, or your shopping list. Space for nature is the one I've mentioned. Extensive livestock production is another one, and that has been broke down. It originally started off at a stocking rate of be under 1.5 livestock unit per hectare. They've brought that down to 1.4, and I think if you get to under 1.2 now, it qualifies on the double. Limiting chemical nitrogen usage. I'll have a look at that again in a second. Planting trees or hedges. Using GPS-controlled spreaders or sprayers. Soil sampling and appropriate liming will qualify for 1 year out of 4. Planting a break crop for the tillage situation, and sowing a multi-species sward. The scheme is voluntary, so you don't have to go for it. But the important thing for most of us here, or most farmers out there, is it's not really voluntary if you want the money. If you want to go back to where you were money-wise, you need to qualify for this. So how do you qualify? One way to see how you're fixed is to check up on Ag Food if you're online, or another way is to see how much space for nature it's up on the department's on Ag Food site, or you can see your stocking rate with the department have a calculator there. So if you Google DEF calculator, it will bring you straight to the site. And this is one page of it. I've just brought up this one as an example here. This is to do with the stocking rates, and I just wanted to highlight the stocking rates for a few reasons. Firstly, the minimum stocking rate for BISS or for ANC, or what they're viewing as to have activity on the farm, is 0.1 livestock unit per hectare. So the 2 schemes are the same, ANC and BISS now. Why I've highlighted here in the box is you'll notice that there's a change here in all the coefficients here for the stock levels for the different animals. So your 0 to 1 year old and your 1 to 2 year old is now 0.4, 0.7. That used to be 0.6. And just for simplicity, we'll have a look at the sheep here. The sheep now is 0.1. That used to be 0.15. But as the stocking rate in the old thing used to be, or the old ANC was 0.15. So in reality, it probably boils down to the same thing. But if you're close to the tolerance limits, you want to make sure you go through them calculations 10 times over to make sure. What we have down here on the bottom then was that practice 3 was the nitrogen usage. And again, some people will be probably thinking about this one and maybe thinking it's a handy one. I just want to highlight one thing here. These are different bands of stocking rates here. So a lot of people will fall here sort of in the medium area, and the stocking rate here, 90 to 130, you're allowed this much, 89 kgs of chemical nitrogen per hectare. 130 to 170, you're allowed almost double that. I'm just making you aware here of, say you're at 120 there, you're allowed that much. Say you're at 140, you're allowed that much. So you want to be, I'm afraid a farmer is going to be having to carry around a calculator with him or a tachograph anymore, you know, that's the problem. So if we look at the old situation here on the money side and and compare with what's the new situation. So I'll have a quick look here at the average for the start. So this one here, this example here, BPS entitlement was worth 179. The greening was 79 on top of that. So the total payment here was 258. And this for 30 hectare farm, he was coming out near 77. This idea of the convergence here, and this is in the old scheme here now I'm talking about. So this finished last year. So this farmer here had to be on a minimum payment here of 110 for his entitlement value last year. So his total entitlements were 158 here when you added the greening. So that total payment was 4780. I won't show you the maximum for a minute. This is the new situation then. Looking forward towards 2026. And the BISS here is 160, the average situation they're reckoning. The CRISS is a more or less flat payment of 43 or 44 euros per hectare. Your eco, if you qualify for it, and you should qualify for it, is 63. That may be maybe up to 10 or more. That's adding up to 267. This farmer's here payment then is adding up to around 8,000, and his old payment was 7,740. So he's to the good by about the 300. The minimum situation then, if we compare it with the previous, the old situation, he had to be at 60% here. He has to be at 85% convergence in the new scheme. His minimum BISS here will be 132. This is going to be the same for both. This is going to be the same for both. So this man's payment now is going to be 239 for his first 30 hectares. And that's adding up to now 7170. So he's doing quite well. I just put in this one here to show you the max situation. This was a farmer that had very high value entitlements. When you added the whole lot up, they were worth 60, originally. But he's new. This convergence will hit him severely here. He's down to 285. Same CRISS, same eco. So his new payment here is 392. You can see he's down from 20,000 to 11,700. So small farmers in the west of Ireland, I would be saying, don't complain too much. So this is this leveling out. So if you want to compare the old system there, them figures, I'm highlighting them here if you can see them on screen. This man has 20,000. This man was only 4,700 compared to the new situation, 7,000, and this man is down to 11 or 12, I'd say. And it's more extreme really for a man with 50 hectares. If you want to work out your exact figures, or well, I won't say exact, but more realistic figures here, you can go to this CAP calculator. It's the same calculator or same page but brought to as what I told you about the stocking rate one here earlier on. You just put in the number of entitlements you have, the number of eligible hectares you have, the value of your entitlements, and the basic payment value of your entitlements plus the greening. And the greening would be 44%, we'll say, on top of your 43, 44% on top of your basic payment value. So that's this value down along here. So you can see this man here, his basic payment plus green was 250, but his BISS is only 149. He isn't changing over the 4 years because he's so near the average. So this is his BISS payment. His eco payment is flat, and his CRISS will be flat because his maximum is out here because we're saying he has 40 hectares. He's only getting paid up to the 30. So he's to the good of 344. So if you want to do it in detail, go into that calculator. It's very simple to use. If you don't want to go to that trouble, this BISS entitlement value is about 60% of this value over here, your basic payment entitlement value plus the greening. It's about 60%. Okay, just a few other points to highlight here, and active farmer is going to be looked at more thoroughly, I think, by the department and more under this regime. So under the CAP strategic plan, active farmers are defined as those engaged in at least a minimum level of agricultural activity. So a minimum level of agricultural activity will be based on the minimum stocking rate, as I said, and it's going to be the same as the NC. So that's making it more simplistic. And I would suggest to people maybe it would be the best route if you are thinking about not having stock and having stock, because if you don't have the stock, you risk not getting your payments, because you'll have to prove them by this area down here where DEF cannot verify the active status of a grassland farmer from its database. You'll be going around collecting receipts, proving to them that you have taken a crop of hay or silage, you have done topping, or you have other grazing livestock. Maybe you'll have to get horse books and the likes. Plans to purchase livestock in 2023 is another example, because they will be looking at the 22 stocking levels in the farm. Just a quick mention, we only got a quick glimpse ourselves there, the new screens. And if any of you are doing your own basic payment online, beware, the new screens or the new application is going to be all different. The pages look all different, and there's going to be about 8 or 9 tabs to go through. And the system will assess your holding status as you go through it. And it'll be asking you questions, or if you have no stock, it'll probably ask you, are you proposing to carry stock or something like that. Inactive herds, as I say, will probably have no payments. So land eligibility and the map situation. So there is a change here too, and an eligible hectare is slightly different, or maybe slightly different. Most people probably not. An eligible hectare is an agricultural area with an agricultural activity and land that's at farmers' disposal. So it's very similar to the current area or current qualification as an eligible hectare. Permanent grassland, arable and permanent crops, artificial features are not eligible, roads, buildings, for example. You will need to check the maps fairly carefully as well because of the eco scheme. Because say, for example, there's a hedge on the map that you see on the map, and you know it's no longer on the ground, or vice versa. There's a new hedge in it. Maybe the maps will need to be corrected. So the bit of a change here is an eligible hectare, and it's a big concession, I'd say. Up to 50% of a parcel can now be made up of a feature beneficial to climate and environment, example, scrub or trees, without the eligible area being impacted. So this area I have here on the screen on the right here, this red area is a way less than 50% of that parcel, as you'd know by just looking at it there. So it's going to probably be all eligible, provided there's no buildings or anything in there. A new thing that's going to come too is your eligible hectare will not be the same as your reference area. So they're going to create another area for this parcel called a reference area, for example, for nitrates. And I don't know the answer yet, whether they'll allow, or what will they allow? Will they allow any of that scrub area at all into the reference area? They mightn't as credit for nitrates. I don't know yet. Or will say that's 50% scrub, will you get 50% credit for it? So land must be farmed, no activity means no payment anymore. So my last, well, I have a summary screen here, but there's two documents I just want to draw attention to as well. A lot of you might be familiar with them. This is if you want to transfer or move entitlements. The first one here is if you want to give authorization to a facilitator or an auctioneer to sell your entitlements, and there's no real change in that one. You just can get that witnessed. There is a change with this new one, well, a new rule that's coming in. If you're transferring entitlements, we'll say change the registration detail, or just transferring entitlements, we'll say to a neighbour, or selling to a neighbour, or leasing them short term. All these forms will need now to be witnessed by an Garda or a solicitor or a police commissioner, which is a big change, and it's going to make a lot of hassle for ye as well as us, but that's the new rule, I'm afraid. Okay, just a summary, maybe the main points that I looked at there. Application this year is different in the way it operates. So instead of 2 elements to the payment as the past, or maybe even 1, a lot of people would have viewed it, there's 3 elements to the payment and to maximize your payment. And as I said, the application process itself is going to be a bit cumbersome, I think, too. This option that used to be on the screens was no change option. That's not going to be there this year. So you'll have no choice but to go through all them screens I mentioned, or tabs. Some parcels will have higher eligible area if not excessive scrub cover on them. So that will be a big help, and it allows some people that might have them excess entitlements be able to claim them back. But remember that that scrub area must be actively farmed, or all actively farmed. It's no good having a piece of scrub, we'll say, finished off, and then saying you're putting it in for payment. If there's no stock going in it, that's no good. If you still have excessive entitlements to trade, will need to be witnessed independently. That's the last screen I was on. No callback if selling in 23 or 24, but we'll be back in future years. That's what we're being told anyway. So if you want to move, it might be a good time to think about it. And the last question I'm putting up here is, if you're buying, selling, or thinking of such, will entitlements be there in 2027 at all? As I said, so I was going through the convergence there, everything is evening off. So what is the need for entitlements there in 27? So if I was asked, would we have the entitlements now? If I was asked 10 years ago, I would have said no, but they're still here. So I might be wrong. Okay. What we're doing is a certain amount of guessing there, but it's a fair indication of what's coming. The fine print, as Brendan mentioned earlier on there, the terms and conditions is yet to be published. So that's it for me for the time being. So I'll hand it back to you, Brendan. Is that okay?
That's brilliant, Eamonn. Thank you very much there. You've given us a great rundown there on that new schemes that's coming in there, the BISS, the CRISS and the eco schemes. The next part of this evening's presentation there will be by my colleague Enda Maloney there from Teagasc Ballinrobe. And just while Enda is getting his presentation ready there, we have a lot of farmers on this evening, over 250 farmers. So plenty of time for putting in your questions. So, type them in there into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screens or your phones, your tablets, and later Vivian will pick up the questions. So over to you now, Enda.
Perfect. Can you hear me now?
That's perfect, Enda. Thank you very much.
Okay. Hi all, you're all very welcome to tonight's webinar. Tonight I'm just going to discuss a small bit about the National Reserve and complementary income support for young farmers. I'm a dry stock advisor in Teagasc Ballinrobe just as of August. So the first thing I'm going to discuss is I'm going to discuss a small bit about the two new schemes in place for young farmers and new farmers. So that's broken down into the National Reserve and the complementary income support for young farmers. So the first point I'm going to discuss is the young farmer category and the new farmer category. So basically, what is the National Reserve? So basically what the National Reserve is, it provides payment entitlements on land on which the applicant holds no entitlements or naked land, which some advisors or clients would call it, or top up the value of existing entitlements to the national average. So as Eamonn discussed there earlier on, there could be lower value entitlements with some farmers are higher value. So if you have low value entitlements, the National Reserve will top up these to the national average. Then the second part is the complementary income support for young farmers. So this is better known as the CISYF. This will provide an additional payment to eligible young farmers as well. This is made based on the number of eligible hectares the farmer has. And this is subject to a max of 50 hectares and is paid for a maximum of 5 years. So a couple of key points regarding the National Reserve from 2023. So there's no off-farm income limit for applicants. So in the past, if you earned more than 40,000 gross off-farm, you aren't eligible for the National Reserve, but that has now been removed. So that's a good thing for a lot of farmers. So 50 entitlements is the max any one farmer can get from the National Reserve for the lifetime of the scheme. And the scheme lifetime is from 2023 to 2027. I suppose people that applied for the National Reserve may be in the old cap between 2015 and 2022. Unfortunately, they're not eligible for the National Reserve going forward. You can only apply for the National Reserve once in the lifetime. And the national average payment entitlement is expected to be around €155 going forward. A bit of difficulty here now. Okay, so the National Reserve for the new farmer category and the old farmer category. So you must be under 40 at the time of first application, and that was the same in the old cap. You must have set up in the 5 years preceding the first application. You must also have a level 6 agricultural education course completed. So in the past, if you had just started a course, you could qualify for the young farmer top-up, but that's not the case going forward. You must have your Green Cert completed. And you must also submit a valid BISS application. And again, an allocation is on a max of 50 hectares. So the National Reserve then for new farmers or new entrants. So this is for farmers maybe that are usually over 40 years of age, might have been out of the country for a couple of years, or maybe just setting up for the first time. So in the new cap, to qualify for the National Reserve as a new entrant or a new farmer, you must have set up for the first time in the preceding 3 years. You must have no other agricultural activity at any time previously. So you couldn't have been on maybe a herd number with your father or an uncle in the past. It has to be a brand new herd number on your own, or else you're joining a herd number. You must have a level 6 completed as well, and you must submit a valid BISS application. And again, the max allocation is 50 hectares. Just moving on then to a bit of background on this new young farmer top up. So it's going to be called the Complementary Income Support for Young Farmers, and it's the successor scheme. It's the successor scheme to the YFS that we're familiar with in the past. So YFS applicants can transfer across into this new CISYF for the remainder of their 5-year term of eligibility and avail of the new payment rates. So if any young farmers are out there and they went in for their young farmer top up last year in 2022, they'll now qualify for 4 years going forward. And if a farmer went in for the young farmers top up in 2020, again, they'll get 3 years in this new CISYF. There's a fund there of around 35 million each year for the scheme for this young farmer top up. Payment is based on the number of eligible hectares, and this again is subject to a max of 50. And it's changed in the new cap where it's based on the amount of activated payment entitlements, as opposed to it used to be different in the past. So payment rates are averaging at about €175 per hectare over the 5 years of the scheme. So that's a massive increase from what it used to be. So the old cap budget versus the new cap. So as I said, in the old cap, it used to be approximately €67 per activated entitlement. Used to get up to a max of 50. As of now, there's a massive increase up to €175 per hectare, up to a max of 5 years. So that's a good increase there in payment wise. So like a farmer there with 20 hectares of land, that's an extra $3,500 a year if they're a young farmer. Again, they must be under 40 at the time of first application. So anyone that's coming close to that 40 age gap, they must be applying on their 39th birthday to get that for the 5 years. So just be aware of that. So they must be applying at the age of 39 to get that for the next 5 years, or younger, obviously. They must have set up into the 5 years preceding their first application, same as the National Reserve. They must have the level 6 course completed, and they must also submit a valid BISS application. So just a small bit then about the financial and managerial control for the young farmers, and a bit of terms and conditions that follow that. So a lot of the young farmers that to come into the likes of myself and Eamonn, they're usually maybe joining on a joint herd number with their father or mother, or they're maybe joining a company if they're kind of in the dairy, working as on a dairy farm, or these registered farm partnerships. So I suppose there's a couple of conditions to meet if you're farming in a group. So a couple of them are at least one person in the group must meet the definition of a young farmer, and they must add their name to the herd number. So if your father's name is, say, John Murphy, and you're the son coming along, or the daughter, your name must be added to that. So it must be now John and Sean Murphy. So that must be on the herd number in order for you to get these young farmer top-ups. The young farmer must exercise effective long-term control within the group in terms of decisions, so kind of farm-related decisions, financial decisions, and benefits that will benefits the farm. The young farmer's name must be on the bank account. So if your mother or father is the current person with the herd number and it's just their name in the bank account, you must add your name to that bank account, and we must upload that to the department when we're applying for the young farmer top-ups. I suppose another thing then is all members of the group must complete a declaration form confirming that this young farmer has effective control within the group, and this must be signed and stamped by a solicitor. So I suppose the young farmer must demonstrate a bit of financial and managerial control of the holding, either on their own herd number or in a joint herd number. It doesn't really matter. So you'll see there on the right hand side, I just have a template there of an AIB bank account. So I suppose when we are applying for these young farmer top ups for you, the likes of myself and Eamonn, we would be we'd have to show proof that the young farmer's name is on that bank statement, and we'd have to be able to show that there has been I suppose transactions done on this farm account as well. So the bank statement must show receipts for the day-to-day farm-related goods purchased. So we'd like to be able to see maybe that cattle were bought or that fertilizer was bought or things like that. So we must prove that to the department that our name is on the herd number and that we're actively farming it as well. So CISYF inspection requirements and penalties. So at least 5% of applicants will be audited each year, and that's no different from before. So anyone that was a young farmer in the past might have been inspected for this young farmer scheme. So the young farmer will be interviewed and required to demonstrate knowledge of the day-to-day operation of the holding. I suppose the farm business transactions are examined to show the young farmer's name on the invoices, receipts, and bank account of the holding. So I suppose when they say interviewed, like the types of questions that they'll be interviewed on is that the department would like to see that the young farmer, if he's on a joint herd number or is farming in his own right, they want to know, do they know exactly what's going on? Because a lot of the time, maybe young farmers are added to a parent's herd number and they're away working in Dublin and they're only down every 6 or 7 weeks and they don't know what's going on the farm. So this is where we do see a lot of the time that young farmers might fail this inspection because they actually aren't actively farming the land. They're just added to the herd number for scheme purposes or for extra income. So where an applicant fails inspection, there will be no scheme payment made that year, and in addition, a penalty will apply equivalent to the amount the applicant would have received if eligible. So if a young farmer was eligible for maybe a top up of 3,000, if they failed the inspection, they'd have to pay back a penalty of about 6,000. So just be aware of that as well. And nearly every 1 in 5 person fails the inspection. So we're not trying to scaremonger you or anything like that, but if people are away and they don't have time to devote to the farm, maybe hold off for a couple of years before getting your herd number until you're about and working on the farm yourself. Okay, just a few common points to note on both the National Reserve and this complementary income support for young farmers. It's only online applications. And all correspondence from the department for both the National Reserve and this young farmer top-up will be online via the INET. I suppose the agent associated with the applicant, so your advisor, will receive an email to advise us that there's correspondence available on your ag food. Then the young farmers, will receive a text if we require more documentation to be uploaded to the department. So you get a text to say that you've correspondence in your inbox, and then you must contact your advisor for us to check out what the department are looking for. I suppose for new applicants, they must submit an application online as well. So anyone that got the young farmer top up maybe in 21 or 22, they are eligible to apply for a rollover into this new CISYF based on the remainder of their 5-year term of eligibility. So you're only basically a young farmer for scheme purposes for 5 years. Okay. Applicants for whom there has been a change of registration to the herd number must submit an application online as well. So any that might be going into a joint herd number with a mother or father, you must get entitlements transferred from the single name into joint names. So that must be done with your advisor at the BISS application stage. I suppose just a small bit then on the benefits of doing the green cert. I suppose there's many benefits of doing the green cert. I suppose the first one is education, really. It's a green cert is a level 6 certification, and the modules that the lads and girls in this office will be covering will be on beef and sheep husbandry, grass production, farm business, sustainable farming and the environment, as well as kind of comprehensive training in grass management skills and beef and sheep skills as well. A qualified farmer can also avail of 60% TAMS grants on shades or handling equipment or a few other items that are available on the TAMS website. They're also eligible for all the top-ups that I previously mentioned, and this stamp duty exemption as well. So any farmer under the age of 35 is exempt from paying stamp duty on the transfer of land. That's currently ranging from about 1% up to 7.5%. I suppose where to obtain a green cert. So look, there's a couple of different ways of doing the green cert, and I'll discuss them here now. So to become a young trained farmer, you must get a level 6 advanced cert in agriculture or a specific purpose cert in farming. So I suppose the 3 ways of doing it in this area is the distance course. So this course is only available to students who have a level 6 or higher qualification in a non-agricultural discipline. So this would be for the likes of nurses, teachers, people like that who have a degree in something else. They're able to do this distance course here in Teagasc and Ballinrobe or Teagasc and Ballina. They're usually delivered on an 18-month period, and students attend for a total of 25 days over the 18-month period, and they're usually on a Friday. They're kind of the days we schedule to do them. I suppose the part-time course then is 1 day a week for 2 academic years, and that's only available for students over 23. So they're also ran here in Teagasc and Ballinrobe and Ballina as well. And then maybe for students coming straight out of secondary school and they want to go on and do a green cert straight away, you have the likes of Mount Bellew in Galway, Pallaskenry in Limerick, and Ballyhaise in Cavan. So students apply directly to the college there, and their full-time courses September to May over 2 years as well. And that would include kind of an off-farm placement as well for them students. So just a couple of emails there for that people might want if they have issues with transfer entitlements, or maybe they have a couple of queries on the National Reserve and young farmers schemes. And look, anyone that is looking to do a green cert, the number there for Teagasc Ballinrobe is there as well, if you have any education queries. That's it from me, really. Thanks for listening, and I'll hand you back over to Brendan. I'll take any questions there at the end.
That's perfect. And I'll just get you just to stop sharing your presentation there. And at this stage, I'll also maybe just ask Vivian and Eamonn there just to come back on. So we have a lot of questions. We have a lot of viewers on tonight. So I'll get straight into it, and I'll hand it over now to our regional manager, Vivian Silke. Good evening, Vivian, and over to you.
Thanks, Brendan, and thanks to Enda and Eamonn for presenting. I just asked the 2 lads to try and be as brief as possible with the answers. We've an awful lot of questions coming in on both presentations, and we'll probably get more as we're going through them. So if you can get to the point, lads, we'll try and finish at 9 o'clock as normal with these events. So the first one, Eamonn, I think you're happy to take it. It's a long-winded question, but we'll go over it anyway. So can you comment on the following? Where a landowner has a big portion of forestry, or an individual that purchased land and basic payment entitlements in 2022, which he knows he wishes to transfer them in 2023, what does she have to do first?
Yeah, big question, Vivian. He wishes to forest the land, I see there as well.
Yeah, we'll do the first part first, Eamonn, if we can. It's just a long-winded sort of a question.
Yeah. the first point there is if he has purchased the entitlements, they're in his name, so he can do what he likes with them. The forestry part would I wouldn't know the exact answer to it, but if that forestry land is forestry eligible or it has an MEA on it, that would be the critical point there, I would say. If it has an MEA, it'll qualify for entitlements. If it hasn't, it won't.
Yeah, I know from past experience that the trickiest BPSs or BISSs, as they're now known, are always involved in forestry. They're always the trickiest ones. The weather's changes.
Yeah, and if he has the forestry contract with it, that will be the starting point with it. And if he has the forestry contract eligible with the department, I'd say that would be the best way to check that out, you know.
Okay, and if he wants to forest the remaining lands that he has, again, you kind of alluded to the answer there, Eamonn.
Well, if it has an MEA or it had entitlements on it in the past, and it qualifies for a forestry premium in the future, it should qualify.
Okay, and just the last part of it then, and we move on to the next one. Please comment on the following, I suppose, in terms of an active farmer and also for qualifying for eco schemes this year.
Active farmer, you'll have to prove to them, well, there's an active farmer, and that was more or less always there, but you'll have to show that you're active also on every parcel anymore, which really wasn't there. So you have to prove to them, and the easiest way to prove to them is from a grassland point of view anyways, is the minimum stocking rate. But if you haven't got the minimum stocking rate, you can prove it otherwise. Say you're selling hay or silage, or you're keeping it in good condition or topping, and you have receipts, or you can prove that you are topping it, that'll do. Qualifying for the eco schemes in 23. Again, you have to, the conditionality there, and that ties in with the forestry side of it there. The forestry land doesn't be counted. I was just looking at it earlier on. The forestry land doesn't be counted up in the space for nature calculation up to the 4%. But for the eco schemes, it's added back into your calculation as far as I can see. So in your overall percentage, it may be allowed, but it won't qualify you for the conditionality part of it.
Okay. And a more straightforward one next, Eamonn, for you. Do you need livestock to qualify for the BISS payment?
As I said there, strictly speaking, no, but it would make life a lot easier for you, I would suggest.
I think there's maybe some confusion out there with farmers. The ANC, or the old headage scheme as we called it, you need livestock for that, but as you said in your presentation, you don't need it for the BISS if needs be.
No, it was more, in the past, there was no question you didn't need livestock. But from now on, the department will check for the activity on the farm. And if there's no livestock there, then you'll have to prove it the same as with ANC. An example would be, for example, deer farmers. I have a few of them actually. And the deer farmers have to send in a request each year for an inspection for the stock to be counted. So that's the sort of criteria you're stuck with if you don't have stock on the ground. Because there's no, the deer unfortunately aren't on this AM system, so there's no record there of them.
Good enough. If you don't have any entitlements, is there a payment for the eco scheme?
Good news is yes. Yeah, you're paid on your eco scheme on whatever hectares, eligible hectares you declare.
So we'll say someone that started farming last year, didn't have any entitlements or couldn't afford to buy them, is now entering the new scheme. This year they'll get the benefit of that.
They should get the eco scheme, but they want well, they mightn't get the CRISS unless they have at least one entitlement. So it might be worth a while going out and chasing one down.
Yeah. Okay. We'll get to you in a minute, Enda, don't worry, we haven't forgotten you. Will the department determine the new scrub area with the maps?
Yeah, similar to the past, yeah. But you may have if you're not happy, you can always query it with them, but you want to have grounds for querying, you know. But yeah. It will be mapped the same as before, yeah.
I'll just switch over to Enda now for a minute. Enda, if a young farmer has been farming for the previous 2 years, but has not applied for the young farmer top up before, so started farming in 21, has 2 years done, didn't do anything in terms of application, the old YFS, they now will apply for the new scheme that you spoke about, will they get the 5 years payment from that scheme, or is it based on when they started farming?
From what I know, it's from when they started farming, so they'll only get the 3 years with the CISYF.
Another one now for you. If you qualified for the Young Farmers and National Reserve last year, does that mean that you'll be excluded from the new National Reserve this year? I think you kind of alluded to that in your presentation.
Yeah. So that farmer there will get 4 years of the CISYF payment, but he won't be eligible for the National Reserve because he already went in already.
Okay, but maybe just a point of clarification that they do have to still apply this year for that.
Yes,
it's not an automatic because they were there last year. Yeah,
no, yeah, they must reapply. Yeah,
yeah, it's very, very important to state that fact. Yeah, one which is related, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Is the 60% TAMS grant available for young farmers only, or is it to all qualified farmers?
It's for young trained farmers only that have their green cert completed.
And it's within a certain time period.
Yeah, it's same rules apply if you're only a young farmer for 5 years for scheme purposes.
Yeah. So just in case that person that asked the question maybe qualified at some stage with the green cert, could have been 10 years ago, that 6% grant is gone for them now if they apply.
Yes,
yeah,
correct.
They had the 5 year window to do that, and that's now gone since the qualification. Okay. A second, now there's a lot of questions going as we're talking. Okay, just another one for you there, Enda. Stamp duty relief, or possibly Brendan can come in here if he likes. Stamp duty relief under 35. Does that mean you can't be 35 on the date, or does it mean you must be younger?
I'll take this one in if you want.
Yeah.
I'll give you a break. Yeah, so Vivian, you have to be under 35. You have to complete the deed of transfer before your 35th birthday. And it's important as well, look at this, I suppose, people, if they're getting close to 35, that they get it completed as soon as possible, and don't leave it down to the last, to the wire. And as well, because a business plan will be needed as well by Teagasc to be certified, and My Farm, My Plan. So you have to be under 35, and the deed of transfer has to be completed by your solicitor. So that question from the viewer needs to be, I suppose, just watched in terms of that deadline. Yeah,
the dates are critical, like all department schemes. Just another kind of question for either yourself, Enda, or Brendan, whichever one of you are happy to take it. If someone is aged 40 plus and taking over the family farm via lease, so the original farm holder is transferring the farm through a lease, is there any benefit on undertaking the level 6 green cert for that person in terms of I suppose the taxes and so on that are involved in land transfer?
In terms, I suppose, Vivian, I'll take it again.
Yeah.
If in terms, I suppose, of maybe some of the capital acquisitions tax, I suppose that'd be one area where we'll say it depends, and we don't know, I suppose, what the taxation situation with that question, I suppose, in the background. And as Enda mentioned there, they may be eligible there for that new entrant category there under the new National Reserve. And the good news is there's no off-farm income either. So that's I suppose, a possibility that someone over the age of 40 may be eligible. And of course, look, there's some unknown benefits yet that might come along over the next number of years, as time rolls out with the cap. So there is, I think, I suppose, to answer that, Vivian, there is some benefits, but not as many as there would be if the viewer was under the age of 35.
I suppose adding on to that as well, if that person who they're leasing it off was leasing them the entitlements and they were low value, they'd also top them up with the National Reserve. So just keep that in mind as well.
Thanks, Enda, for that. Again, another one on young farmers, and I suppose maybe just to clarify this question, are you a young farmer when you qualify with the level 6 qualification, as in an agricultural level 6, as opposed to, you mentioned the distance course, and I think in our presentation that we handled distance course in Ballinrobe, and the distance course available to people who have a level 6 or higher in another discipline. So just to clarify that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so if someone else has a level 6 in a non-agricultural discipline, they are eligible then to do a distance course in Teagasc Ballinrobe or Teagasc Ballina, but then they'll have to do their 25 contact days to obtain their green cert.
So from a young farmer's point of view, you must do the level 5 and level 6 in agriculture to qualify for all the exemptions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Eamonn, I'll just get back one or two to you now. Is there a way of calculating your scrub area from the Department of Agriculture's point of view, or is the maps where you start?
From the maps. If you're not happy with the maps, you can measure it up yourself. But generally speaking, the maps are pretty accurate nowadays, so I don't think there's much point in arguing. The only grey area, maybe, what I mentioned about, say, a parcel is 50% scrub. Well, if it's less than 50% scrub, the parcel will be eligible. Say the whole parcel is scrub. If it's less than 50%, the whole parcel will be eligible. Whereas if it's 53% scrub, 55% scrub, it won't be eligible.
Another one for you. How are entitlements allocated to new young farmers? Is it the same as everyone else? Is it 1 per hectare?
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't matter whether you're young or old.
Yeah, I should have maybe just clarified that when I was doing mine there. Presentation was, there's no such thing as stacking or consolidation of entitlements as in a previous era.
And another quick question: is the ANC still available?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So just again, maybe one for Enda or Brendan. It's a common one we get. Based on your experience dealing with farm transfers between father and son, how long before the son's 35th birthday should be given to allow the transition process to begin and conclude on time, dealing with solicitors and so on and so forth?
I can take that one, Enda, if you want.
Yeah.
Look at Vivian, I suppose, every situation is different, but probably on the by and large, you'd probably want to allow at least 6 months, because auctioneers are going to have to value the farm. You'll also have to get title deed searches to be completed, and who knows what that may pop up or arise from that. So at least 6 months, and as I mentioned, the My Farm, My Plan business plan will have to be certified by Teagasc. So getting that completed and get that certified will also take time. So it depends on the time of year. Then you could also run into problems with holidays. So certainly would want to maybe allow for at least 6 months, 6 to 8 months anyway. Yeah.
Sorry, can I come back there on one, Vivian? There, the 50% scrub I mentioned there. I said that if it was over the 50% scrub, it wouldn't be eligible, but it'd have to be over 70% scrub to be eligible. It'd be still partially eligible at the 50%. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. It's easy to get confused. See how confused it is. Excuse me, we're confused. So, it's all in percentages and bends and so on. So, another one, Eamonn, for you there. Can livestock and topping be used together to be deemed an active farmer in the new cap, or can it only be one of these?
That could be combined, yeah. But you see, you'll have the dilemma. Well, if you hit the minimum of 0.1 livestock unit per hectare, you're okay. Yeah. And if you don't hit it, then you're back to more or less same as no livestock. So
the livestock one seems to be the easier, most straightforward option, but you need to watch the minimum stocking rate, as you said. Yeah. Has there been any indication given on when the terms and conditions will be published by the department? I think you mentioned in your presentation, Eamonn.
Into February, I'd say, early March. That's when they're talking about opening the online system, I think, is to have a look. Anyways, I don't know whether it'll be operational or not.
Another question here on entitlements. What is the cost of buying entitlements?
Yes, okay, as long as it's ring. I'd be always saying the value of them is, if you want to know the real value of an entitlement, go to your auctioneer, the value. But generally speaking, we'd have always gone on the old rule of kind of what value is entitlement is. Maybe we would trade them maybe at half their value, So.
Maybe if you just comment on what the auctioneers generally charge, maybe that's, I'd say, what the question is leaning towards.
Yeah, well, I leave that to the auctioneers. They'll have a commission charge, but it's usually, I think it's usually 6 to 10% maybe.
On both sides.
Yeah. On both sides, yeah.
Yeah. So it can amount up a bit. Just one or two before we finish up. It's a bit off topic, Brendan. I think you're going to take this one, but the purchase of farmland where a purchaser is a young trained farmer with the green cert completed, are they exempt from the stamp duty of 6% on the purchase price?
So the first thing I suppose, look, Vivian, again, it'd be back to the stamp duty guidelines. That viewer there would want to be under the age of 35. Again, they need to have the deed of transfer completed before their 35th birthday, and that requires their solicitor and their, to complete some transactions there. The business plan would need to be certified by Teagasc, and I suppose, look, it's important to not leave it too close to the 35th birthday, but in actual fact, Vivian, it's actually 7.5%, so that's an extra saving there for that viewer. So 7.5% on purchase, but it can be saved if all the criteria are met.
Thanks, Brendan. Folks, we're out of time. Thanks very much for all your questions. We didn't get around to some of them. Any of them that we didn't, we'll follow up with an email later on in the week. And I'll hand back to Brendan to close the webinar.
So thank you very much, Vivian. And as Vivian said, we're just about out of time this evening. I'd like to thank our two panelists for sharing great information with us this evening, Enda Maloney and Eamonn Patten here from Teagasc Ballinrobe. And indeed, thanks to Vivian there for facilitating the questions and answers. And as Vivian mentioned there, with a lot of questions, we will follow up in the coming days with those questions, with a response to you. And indeed, most importantly, thanks to you at home for tuning in and engaging with us. We had over 250 farmers on tonight, and we have lots of questions there, so we will follow up in the coming days. We hope you found this beneficial, and indeed 2023 will be a busy year. It's a change year in terms of all the different schemes, so certainly we hope it'll be the first of many information sessions that you hear about these new topics. All that's left for me to say is that we'll be back here again next week for the third episode in this series, where my advisory colleagues Tom Kelly and Mary Roach will discuss and give us an update on the new acre scheme, and also give us an update on water quality trends. So that's something to tune into next week at the same time, and indeed with the same link. So with that, it's good night from us all here in Teagasc Mayo, and we'll see you all again next week at 8 p.m, folks, and good night from us all again.